When I beat my drug dealer in college and said, I need weed, I got a bag of weed.
But I'm going to just go ahead and invite Jay Shifman up to share his story. So let's give it up for Jay.
Welcome to the Choose Your Struggle podcast. I am your host, Jay Shifman. Welcome to another episode of the Choose Your Struggle podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is episode 7. We've made it to episode 7. I don't know, that just seems pretty cool to me. As I said on last week's episode, I love how many people are listening to this podcast. I really do. I can see the numbers here, and they keep climbing, and I don't get it. I mean, look, I know that I'm talking to really cool people. I know that we're talking about interesting topics, but there are a lot of great people out there doing great work. I don't know. It's just cool to me, and I appreciate it. So, you probably noticed a new format on the podcast last week. Not only did we have another interview, which is going to be more often because people are coming out of the woodwork going, thank you for talking about this. I would love to do so. And that's sweet to me. That makes me super happy. But we also had a shout out to start the episode. Now, I'm not always going to have someone as amazing as Milana Weintraub. I apologize. I'm not 100% sure of how to pronounce her name, but she's great. But we are going to do that every episode now. Someone is going to start off the episode with a little bit of a shout out about the topics of addiction and mental health. Like I said before, I'm just super happy that so many people are listening and that so many people want to be a part of this podcast. That makes me incredibly happy. So if you want to be part of that, I've had a bunch of people reach out. Please keep it going. I've got a nice list going, but you can reach out to me and tell me that you want to be part of the shout out. I would love to have you. And it can be about anything in those parameters, about addiction, about mental health. The person doing it for today's episode is a super good friend of mine. Her name is Missy Day. She is a ray of sunshine. You'll hear that in this intro. She is a senior marketing manager, I think is her title, for T-Mobile out in Seattle. We were friends when we were younger, sort of after high school, that period. We're still friends. I mean, when I say we were friends when we were in person in Cincinnati, Ohio back then. We've been friends ever since. She's great. You're going to hear a really interesting take on addiction from her. She does address the difference between physical dependence and addiction, which is a really interesting topic. It's one that creates a lot of discussion. It's one that people still sort of disagree on. You'll hear a really interesting take from her, and I'm so thankful that she shared her own story, which is a slightly different one than you hear a lot, and I love it, and I really appreciate her, and I cherish our friendship. I really do. So the interview today, if you thought that just hearing from Missy Day was amazing, you're going to be blown away by this interview. I'm so excited for y'all to hear it. I'm excited to hear what you say afterwards. His name is Mike Pachan. He is the CEO of Mountain Made and one of the founders. He's been in the cannabis industry since the late 2000s, back when, as you'll hear him say on the interview, they weren't sure if their doors were going to get kicked in and agents were going to be dropping from the skylights. I mean, this guy was one of the early entrepreneurs when it came to the weed industry. Just a fascinating interview. Our stories are similar in some ways. Obviously, I'm not in the weed industry. I mean, our personal stories. And he's just an incredible guy. Not only was he great to talk to, and you'll enjoy this interview, but he sent me some product afterwards to try. And I haven't been feeling great. I don't have COVID. Don't worry. Not going to get too into what's going on with me. Still waiting on, some doctor's results and stuff like that. But his product has been incredible during this. I've been in a little bit of pain, nothing too bad, but a little bit. And I tried his CBD for that, and it's been great. I cannot overstress how thankful I am that he and I crossed paths at this time. It was incredible. So enjoy that interview. Enjoy Missy's shout out, and reach out if you want to be a part of this. If you want to tell me, what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying, what you want more of. All of you who have reached out about bracelets, thank you. It's awesome. I'm sending them out super quickly. And that makes me happy. Like I can't stress that enough. I want to get rid of these, not because I want them gone, but because it makes me super happy to think that people want them and they are going out into the world. So reach out. You'll hear again on this podcast how to do so. For everything else, my website is www.jayshifman.com. I am the next Shifman, Shifman, on Instagram. I am at JB on Twitter, and on Facebook and LinkedIn, I am Jay Shifman. So reach out. Look forward to hearing from all of you, and spread some love this week. That's where I am right now because of the health stuff. And also, I'm recording this intro on the 15th of April. I was supposed to be sitting front row at the Boston Celtics' last home game of the year tonight, crossing something off my bucket list. The end of March was my 10-year anniversary of being in recovery, and this trip was going to be a celebration of that, and it's not happening. Obviously, not that big of a deal. I'm missing that experience. That experience would be a once-in-a-lifetime amazing experience, but I can do that again with everything else happening in the world. Obviously, that puts that into perspective. With what's going on with my health, puts that in perspective. But spread some love, and I will catch you after the interview.
So I guess I never thought that I was an addict until I started really diving into my own self and realizing my own addictive patterns. I think a lot of people think addiction just means you're addicted to alcohol or drugs. And even when I say I smoke a lot of weed, I think people are like, oh, that's not an addiction. It's not habit forming. Just so many things could be habit forming. And both my parents grew up with forms of addiction that I don't think people would have ever associated with addiction. For example, both my parents are very conscious of their weight. So I grew up with this image of myself and needing to be a certain weight. Like my dad, he always worked out multiple times a day, morning, lunch, and multiple times in the evening. And it was just a very set routine for him. And I would say that that's an addiction. It overran his whole life. We had to plan our whole schedule around him. And it was similar with my mom's eating habits. She would never eat dinner with us. It was a whole nother way of food addiction. A lot of people think food addiction of overeating, but undereating and not eating the right amount of food too is addiction. And the way my addiction manifests itself, like I said, weed, I think that's totally an addiction for me, and it's a way to help me cope. But I think another addiction is being a workaholic that I've had to overcome. Thinking that that addiction, if I just do this next thing and work, if I get that next career jump, if I finish this project and people will think better of me or more highly of me, and then that means that I'm more fulfilled or that I'm okay. So I guess that's how my addiction has really manifested the most in my life. And it all stems from, I think upbringing and just seeing how addiction manifests in all these different ways in people that you care about. I think my favorite self-help author, her name is Gabby Bernstein. This is when I really started to uncover a lot of my addictive patterns and behaviors that I want to change in myself. The first book that I read of hers is called The Universe Has Your Back. And it's all about how the world isn't against you and looking for little signs from the universe to keep a positive way of mind and to not let yourself spiral down that shame spiral or depression or whatever. I've been coming back to her a lot and remembering the universe has my back. So Gabby Bernstein, she's pretty fab.
Hey y'all. Thank you to everyone who continues to reach out, especially those who have requested bracelets. They're going super fast, and I love it. As a reminder, for those of you who have not yet, I'm giving away free Choose Your Struggle bracelets to anyone who reaches out through my website. It's that easy. www.jayshifman.com. Go to the Contact Me page and reach out and tell me your address. Tell me that you heard this ad on the podcast. And tell me if you want a purple bracelet for addiction awareness or a green bracelet for mental health awareness. That's all you have to do. It's that easy. and keep reaching out because you may end up on the podcast. All right, back to the episode.
Jay, thank you so much for having me on today. My name is Mike Pachan. I'm a startup junkie, entrepreneurial addict, team builder, functional fitness enthusiast, dog dad, and loyal, loving husband. As CEO of Mountain Made and president of M Pachan Ltd, I like to go like hell with 9 years of cannabis experience, 5 years in hemp, 3 years in group fitness. I have 3 successful startups under my belt, including the creation of patient programs out here in Colorado, interacting with children and adults with CBD as early as 2012, and over 100,000 direct interaction with cannabis patients in 5 years. Looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you so much.
Wow. Well, thank you for being here. Really, really a joy. I have some pretty cool Colorado experience. My family, my parents have a place in Aspen, and we grew up going to Aspen. My dad was a ski instructor there in college, so there's a huge kind of family history. Both my parents went to Boulder at one point, so we got a lot of love for Colorado. But I have to start with, we always start with your story, and I definitely want you to tell me as much of that as you want. But first question, I saw that you went to Kent State. I'm an Ohio guy. Tell me about your Ohio experience and what took you from Ohio to Colorado.
Yeah, great question. So I'm an Ohio native, born and raised in Canton, Ohio. I was actually at the University of Toledo studying pharmacy. There was an awesome 4-year pharmacy program at Toledo. On year 2.5, I was delivering pizzas for a living and quit my job to grab a free ticket to drive over to Purdue to see a string cheese concert. And on the way home, we were pulled over and I had half gram of cannabis in my pocket. They arrested me. It was a pretty serious charge with 6 months in jail on the line. I was able to get a deferred sentence, work my way through a year of very, very strict probation. And during that time is when I decided to drop out of Toledo, move home with my parents, kind of get my act together, and ended up at Kent State University and got a degree in business.
Well, Kent is a fantastic school. I have an aunt that went to Kent. I went to Worcester for a year, so I was up in that area as well. And like you, I have a very similar experience. My roommate and I were dealing, this is when I was at Worcester, to probably a third of the campus, and we got arrested with a couple of other people. And, it really opened my eyes to how this country treated weed and all this, everything around that. Now, this was 2005, very different from today. What year was your arrest?
Yeah, so 2003, and I agree. It's interesting to reflect back. That was 17 years ago, and it was devastating. I mean, I almost lost my student loans. It was an overwhelmingly stressful year of my life. I had to go to drug addiction classes, 200 hours community service, etc. And now I'm a homeowner on 2 acres, successful small business owner with 2 companies. And it's just incredible how far that experience has carried me to the current present day, and where cannabis and CBD are now nationally and globally compared to when I was sitting in a jail cell in April of 2003.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me, and I'm sure you see this you're working in this industry. The very same people who were telling us, you 17 years ago and me 15 years ago, that we were criminals and what we were doing was wrong, are now people who are huge advocates for CBD and for medical marijuana and legalizing marijuana, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I'm thankful that people were able to mature into, better thought patterns and kind of evolve with, the wave of excitement around CBD and cannabis. But at the same time, it's also difficult for me to look back and, LinkedIn is a hard thing for me to be on because there's so many new people that have established themselves as experts and they really should be more in their learning curve than an established expert. But, you see that in all emerging industries, and usually like the saying goes, it all comes out in the wash. And that's one thing that at Mountain Made, the CBD company that I'm a partner in, is we really strive to bring good information out to people because there's an overwhelmingly large amount of bad and unqualified information out there. We do our best, even if, Mountain Made is not bringing the product that best serves you to the table. We're actually going to tell you that and steer you into something that works best for your case. But we feel like we have a solid CBD product that hits a majority of the market for several reasons. But I do these podcasts constantly. If you go on either my personal website or Mountain Made's website, I'm always on podcasts doing my best to spread good information about cannabis and or CBD, whether it directly relates to sales of my products or companies. I just want people to have good tools to use in making decisions.
So I definitely want to get deep into that. That's what I'm super excited about. Before we move in that direction, two things. One, I try to give my guests here an opportunity to promote themselves 10 times on this thing. So, please tell me your website, spell that out for us, and also your company's website. But also, let's then go back to, you've been arrested, you transferred to Kent, you graduated, and then how do you get from there being a industry leader in the CBD and marijuana industry?
Yeah, great. So let's start with Mountain Made, and I'm Ohio, so I'll say Mountain Made and lump them all together, but it is Mountain Made. That's MADE, mountainmade.life. We do CBD for the activated lifestyle. The base of our CBD product system is high dose tablets. We have 3 different tablets to choose from. You can get the whole system and integrate over 100 milligrams of CBD into your day-to-day regimen for under $170. This month, through April, we're actually doing a sale because we understand people are financially unstable right now. So you can get that whole system for under $100 at this point. Again, the Mountain Made product system, we hold steady to the idea that if you're taking less than 25 milligrams of CBD a day, you probably bought snake oil. We're promoting high dose, high dose, high dose. The other website for the company that I own and operate in the cannabis space is M Pachan Ltd. That's M Pachan, PACHAN Ltd.com. I've been a wholesale operator in the cannabis space for over 5 years. I help people manage their brands, develop products, find sales channels, develop ambassador programs, etc. And that's been a successful company of mine for over 5 years.
Wow. So first off, congratulations. That's awesome. Talk us through a little bit. So you graduated, you're going to Colorado. And also, it seems like for those of us who don't live in Colorado, in California, I followed this pretty closely. I've always been a huge advocate of legalizing cannabis and CBD and all that. But for a lot of people, it really seemed like one day, all of a sudden, this was all here. You were there during the growth of this. Can you talk a little bit about both your experience and also what that was like, seeing this grow around you?
Yeah. So I'll start with my story on how to even get out here first, because that kind of plays into how I entered the cannabis space so early. It was I literally tripped and fell into it, literally. So I get to Kent and I finish up school December 2006. So I was 6.5 years senior, was the joke. I barely graduated. It was just a tough transition, and that arrest really kind of set me back mentally and a little bit physically as well. So I graduate and I had an excellent opportunity. I jumped into a sales position with a small business out of Alliance, Ohio. It was friends of the family. They had been owner operators for 35, 40 years. And they taught me a lot. They had an excellent onboarding team training program, a wonderful company culture. They sold packaging material, so flexible packaging. They trained me up for 9 months and sent me down south to Atlanta, put me on the road for 2 years. And I was traveling between 6 and 8 states over the course of 2 years, helping them try to find and develop new business. And I'll be honest, at that point in time, I was a terrible salesperson. I just didn't get it. I just was, not very effective out in the field, but I worked hard. So after about 3 years with that company, I was ready to try something else. I just wasn't totally sold on where I was living in my environment. I had a good friend group, but it just wasn't me. Deep down, it just wasn't me. And it just so happens a buddy of mine who I went to Kent State with, who was living out in Telluride, Colorado, called me and out of the blue, said, "Hey, how's life? Where you at?" And I said, "Man, I'm about ready for a transition." And he said, "Well, I'm so glad you said that. I was up in the town today and someone put up a sign that said assistant manager needed at a ski rental store." And he said, "Drop out, leave everything that you're doing, get in a U-Haul and come live in my basement and let's do this thing this winter." And I sat down in front of my computer, Googled Telluride, Colorado, and my gut feeling said, do it. And I did. A week later, I resigned. They let me go on the spot. I packed up a U-Haul and left October of 2009 and moved out to Telluride, Colorado and lived in a basement.
Wow. So a couple of parallels between your and my story there. I also was I went to college in 2005 and graduated in 2012 with a couple of years off, struggling with addiction in the middle. So I understood. And also just weird coincidence, when you left on the spot to move to Telluride in October 2009, same month that I went to an inpatient center in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, while beginning my efforts to end my addiction struggles. So very, very weird parallels there, but I'm with it, man. I feel it.
Yeah, it's a small world, and I think at the end of the day, we all go through similar struggles. I try to balance, not, because it's very easy for me. I could talk through this whole podcast and do nothing but really highlight and elevate myself. And you'd be like, wow, that Mikey sure has it all together and what a successful guy. But what I'm not telling you and what you wouldn't hear paints a different picture. And I've had to work very, very hard to get to where I'm at in life, mentally and physically. And I think sometimes that we need to come back and remind ourselves that struggle is okay. The current place that you're in today may not be the place that you're in tomorrow. That's okay. Evolving as a person, mentally, physically, spiritually, happens to all of us. And we have a tendency to heroize people's stories. And, I think it's just so important to reflect on the tough times. I struggled with substance abuse, recreational drug use. I'm not proud of that, but I'm not afraid to say it either, and that's just part of my story.
And I'm sure it also helps you in what you're doing today because you've seen what it's like when these things are not used correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a high drive person. Like my brain goes 24/7. Part of my struggle and my journey was displacing that energy into something good.
Mm-hmm.
College, it's not that it was boring. It's just, it didn't promote my work ethic. When I was in high school, I worked doing labor jobs at a greenhouse and I never drank or did drugs at all in high school. I didn't have a reason to. I was busy. In college, that busyness slowed down. And I was too young and immature to realize that that wasn't okay. And I was substituting that boredom with drugs and alcohol. And now in my 30s and coming into my 40s here in a few years, I have a routine. I purposely bought a house and a property that needed remodeled. I have 2 small businesses. I'm self-employed. That's my addiction. That's where that energy goes into. Because I know if I'm getting all effed up all the time, I can't function. And I live a high risk, high reward lifestyle where if I'm not up every day grinding, there's no money coming in.
I'm with you right away, man. I feel that 100%.
Yeah. So getting back to the story. So I moved out to Telluride, 2009, coming into the winter of 2010, had a ball. What the job out of college taught me was how to be professional. I saw the opportunities. I was in front of a lot of small business owners. It really honed me in professionally and gave me a great platform to start to build my career from. What Telluride showed me is Colorado was a lifestyle that I really wanted from the people and the activities. So then that April, I went seasonally unemployed because the ski industry shuts down. And I had an opportunity to literally trip and fall into cannabis. And what the cannabis space has allowed me is to merge personal and professional. And I tell people I'm now professional at being myself. That's what this industry has blessed me with after 10 years of being involved in it.
I'm going to steal that. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to start saying
No,
that.
go ahead, man. Yeah, but professional being yourself, and I think that's something a lot of us strive to do. It took me 10 years to get to where I'm at. The first 5 years in the cannabis space were a struggle. I was broke. I was trying a lot of different things. The past 5 years have been incredible. So I had an investment period that I had to roll through for 5 years, and now it's showing a massive return. Um, but you want to hear the story how I tripped and fell into it? It's kind of interesting.
I do, and especially because you were tripping and falling into it like during what was essentially the gold rush of the legal cannabis industry.
Yeah, I mean, hell, I was even in it before the gold rush. Like when we were still like, man, our door's gonna get kicked in. So there I am in April, and I'm sitting in my apartment, and I didn't really plan too well for off season. I was playing decent, but the whole town shuts down, and now I'm going, I can't sit still for 6 weeks. That would be devastating. I can't. I'm not the personality that can do that. What do I do? And so as I was getting ready to transition out of my job in the South and move to Telluride, I picked up a couple self-help books about manifesting and cultivating your own reality. And then, of course, in Colorado, they just eat that up, right? That's in normal day-to-day conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, all right, I'm going to have faith in my newfound beliefs, and I'm going to manifest a job. I'm going to put on my headphones, and I'm going to walk around this town till I find a job. So I leave my apartment, and I'm ready to go manifest a job, and I make it like 6 doors up, and a door opens and hits me. Boom. And this big fella, this kind of redneck hillbilly fella comes out and says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What are you doing?" And he slapped a sign on the door, and it was handwritten. It said, "Cocopelli Wellness now open." He said, "I'm opening a dispensary, moving in tonight, opening the doors tomorrow." And I said, "Well, that's interesting. I'm looking for a job." He said, "Well, come unload my truck. Let's talk." So I helped him unload his truck. We brought inventory in. We set up the internet. We got the systems up and running. And at that time, we were dialing a doctor, opening a laptop, dialing into a chiropractic's office in Denver. So I test ran that. They approved me as a medical marijuana patient. I faxed over the paperwork. We got it all signed. I ran it down to the post office. I just showed him that I had a work ethic and a brain. And at the end of the night, he said, "Well, congratulations, you're hired. You start tomorrow. Come run the shop for me. I'll pay you $10 an hour." And I said, "That's awesome." And that's literally how I got my start in the cannabis space.
That's a great story, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And let me tell you something. It's not like when you see it on CNN or CSNBC now where it's like glamorous and cool. Like, it was a shop that was haphazard, and we were growing weed out of a house legally, and we were trimming up weed on the spot. And it was just a totally different environment. And I was so pumped to have that job that summer. It was just one of the coolest summers of my life.
So as you hinted at earlier, this is still at the time where the rest of the country is looking at Colorado and California like, you crazy hippies, what do you think you're doing? What was that like living in that scenario where, as you hinted before, as you said before, like you were scared? Is this a thing that we can actually do?
Yeah, so it was interesting because there's a duality to it, because you got to keep in mind that I was in Telluride, and Telluride is a whole different realm of life, right? I mean, for people that don't know what Telluride is, imagine a cul-de-sac, like a dead end, and in this little town sits in a cul-de-sac of the mountains. So it dead ends in the mountains. You have mountains on 3 sides of you. There's maybe 2,000 people that live there. It's 8 blocks by 12 blocks, and it's a very small, tight-knit community. And we just opened the 3rd dispensary or weed shop in town. The rules and regs were flexible, so I was sitting outside on the sidewalk, chatting with people, high-fiving. So the people in the town were totally fine with it. The out-of-staters who couldn't even purchase it that time because it was medical only were blown away by it. So I was hiding it from my family for a few years because I didn't even know how to tell people what I was doing. How to even tell them, "Oh, yeah, we're legally selling weed," because we didn't really even get it. We were following the rules, but the rules were changing all the time. So when I finally started to disclose it, people were telling me to get a real job, to grow up, to get a sense of purpose in life. And, all the things that any good entrepreneur is going to hear,
Sure.
When you're walking around, and I'm not comparing myself to Bill Gates by any means, please, but, he's walking around campus with punch cards talking about technology that other people couldn't see. And people are like, man, you got to get it. Or Dyson, who was in his backyard making 5,000 prototypes for 10 years before it ever clicked. And you hear these successful entrepreneurs, and again, not putting myself in that same realm. I have a long way to work towards, but that same story, I was being told that same story. Get a life, get responsible, grow up. You're almost gonna be 30. Like, do something with yourself. And I had a gut feeling and a vision that said, if I stick this out, there's a point and purpose to this, and I'll be damned. There is, and there was. So.
Yeah, and obviously you were proven right, not just you, but everyone who was working hard 10 years ago to produce this environment we're in now when it comes to legal cannabis in the CBD industry. So you sort of got to participate in the trial and error of that living in Colorado at this time.
Yeah, I did, and that's really what drew me in is, I would sell someone a bag of weed legally and chuckle about it, but then they'd come back and they'd be like, man, like my anxiety seems to be better, or I skied better today, or my knee pain, or this, that, and the other. And so I started to kind of catalog that mentally. And the first 5 years of my career I spent in what are now called retail settings or dispensaries, talking to patients and customers and asking open-ended questions and seeing people start to evolve with the use of their cannabis therapies and logging and cataloging it all. And it was just an incredible experience. I mean, the youngest person I've ever helped legally was 14 months old. And that was through, and there was a double sign off from physicians and parents, and it was all, the paperwork was in line. And, we were selling them CBD THC oils to help with severe epilepsy. Mm-hmm. The oldest person I've ever helped was in their 90s and everywhere in between. So it's been just a wealth of, really cool experience there. But at first, it just started out as a way to sell bags of weed and not go to jail again for it.
So I think you make a really good point, and that is that the evolution in thinking around all the ways that cannabis can help, and we're seeing it now so I smoke CBD all the time. I smoke it because I love what it does for me, and two, I miss the days of smoking cannabis the way I used to, but I just don't anymore. So I love the taste, I love the smell. But this is a thing that is currently evolving, let alone as what you were just pointing to, which is the different ways different strains of cannabis can help us. My wife and I have gone to shops in Colorado, and what works for her doesn't work as well for me. How hard is that? Is that mostly through your own experience, or is there a lot of information that's now coming out about different strands and different ways that it can help?
Yeah. So first of all, check out Mountain Made. Again, Mountain Made, mountainmade.life. We just launched a line of organic smokable hemp, but I love to smoke hemp as well. Just that cannabinoid rich smoke and all that goodness coming in your body. So currently with strains and, efficacy for certain ailments, it's still a little bit up in the air right now. They're still trying to sort through all that. But I can tell you, if you get a job behind a dispensary counter and you work that job for a month and you see 1,000 people and you ask 100 of them, how did the Durban poison make you feel? 85 to 90 out of those 100 people are going to say very, very similar stuff. So that's what's cool to watch. The synergies start to build and the strata start to build of, these data points coming into data sets and then equaling information. It's going to take decades for people to really narrow it down. But as we do, we're going to see some really cool evolution of products. I mean, I can smoke flower and pick different strains from the same grower and can feel a massive difference for me. I have to shy away from Bruce Banner, especially Bruce Banner number 3. I just can't function on it. I'll stand in front of the washing machine and go, what am I down here for? Where I smoke on a strain like Durban Poison or Spec Ops, and I'm so engaged in my day and so overwhelmed with mental clarity, and I get so much done. I smoke weed either way, but those terpenes, the different molecules in cannabis, are affecting and driving that THC to provide a different effect. And that's real. There's fact. That's fact behind that, the entourage effect. So, it's interesting. A lot of it's a bit of a personal journey. For me, I struggle eating cannabis. When you ingest cannabis, like an edible, your liver reconverts the THC and amplifies the effect. I can't handle it from a mental perspective. It's overload. There's other people that swear by edibles, and it just goes back and forth and back and forth. So it's very much a personal journey, but there's definitely general stratas built that can help guide someone to get a foothold to start their journey and provide a pretty low risk situation where, you won't get overwhelmed and you'll be able to start your journey correctly, which is cool in itself.
That is an awesome point. You and I think, are lucky that we started when we were younger. And so, not in the sense of, I definitely would never advocate that just anyone should go try weed when they're in their teens without someone like you or someone helping them through this. But we were able to get into our minds, okay, there are positives and negatives to this. So understanding that is not a new thing for us, right? What would you say to someone who, I don't know, someone like our parents' generation, who their only idea of cannabis or marijuana is, back in the 60s, what they used to smoke? Talk a little bit about how different it is today and how you would encourage them to start using it in a safe way.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, if someone's not open to it, I just don't bother. I did a podcast earlier this morning, and I don't really think that gentleman was wondering why they're considered essential businesses. It's just like booze. It's just an intoxicant. And I said, look, it's not my responsibility to break down those walls for you. Pull up www.google.com and start there, because the fact is that Israel has been studying cannabis for a decade. The fact is they're driving science-based studies that show, cannabis has therapeutic value. The fact is I've helped 100,000 patients in Colorado, and I've seen it provide therapeutic value. So if you can't get to there, it's a lost cause, and that's
sure.
Okay. No problem. But for people that are opening, up there to look, listen, and learn, you can walk into any dispensary in Colorado and the staff, the bud tenders, are ready to help you. They're ready to ask questions to start to kind of filter you out. Like, what are you looking for in cannabis? It's more refined. It's so think of it like this: 60s, 70s, even when you and I were going to college, right? When I beat my drug dealer in college and said, I need weed, I got a bag of weed. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what genetic it was. Right. Therefore, I didn't know what response to expect. Therefore, I didn't know if I was ever getting that same genetic or strain the second, third, fourth, fifth, 50th time. So it was hard for me to even build a result-based diary. I had no idea. I'd smoke weed in college, it'd make me paranoid. I'd smoke weed in college, it'd make me feel great. And you could never figure that out. Now that we have a baseline where cultivation site A, B, C are all growing, in-house genetics, and then bringing them into products that the consumers can buy, and then those products are consistent, that helps people create a foothold. And that's where you kind of have to take your past experience with marijuana and cannabis and dissolve it and start fresh. The consistency of products and product availability in itself offers a different platform to start from.
That's a wonderfully put. Thank you. And I really appreciate the point that on a personal level, look, this isn't for everyone, and nor should it be. And if someone's not open to it, they don't have to be. The only question I would have on that is someone who has been doing this for a long time. What about people who are in a position of power? Here in South Carolina, where I live, there's literally one person, and there's articles in the paper about this, that the only person fully advocating against even medical marijuana is the head of the policemen's union here in South Carolina, very outspoken against it. And for that reason, he is holding back an entire state. how do we approach someone like that who is just so closed off? And again, they don't have to accept it personally, but they are keeping thousands, millions of people from being able to have access.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how that person got into the position of power, but if it's through any type of voting, you get out to the polls and you start to vote, right? You know, thankfully enough, the governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, announced that, he sees the cannabis industry as an essential industry for various reasons, including tax revenue. Um, the mayor of Denver came out and tried to shut that down in Denver, claiming that we're non-essential. That lasted less than 3 hours.
Wow.
And, we contacted him via phone, email, Twitter, and he reversed that policy in under 3 hours, right? And brought the industry back online, So, it is unfortunate to see people who are basing a decision off, misinformation or factless information. Right. It really is, because again, it's not for everyone. Cannabis isn't for everyone. It's for a lot of people. And, just as much as I can make the decision to, go down to the liquor store and buy booze, or, take a vitamin, or go to yoga or a CrossFit, like there's so many choices that regard health and wellness, that we do have the ability to reach ourselves. It seems it's getting to a level of absurdity that any one person could hold back cannabis from a state's rights perspective. There's going to be some of the last dominoes to fall, and they're going to be a bear to push over. But there's no doubt that they're going to hit a tipping point at, some point. You would think it has to happen in the next 3 to 5 years, at least at a state level. And there may be states that choose to not have medical or recreational cannabis, but you would hope that that state is making a choice statewide involving as many people in that decision loop as possible.
And I think that you're right. We're getting to that point. I don't think that, 20 years ago, before either one of us had been arrested, when, if you're anything like me, you're smoking in your buddy's basement trying to make sure his mom doesn't come down, we would have thought that we'd be at this position in 2020. So I think we are seeing that progress. And what's amazing is that, places like Colorado that have completely legalized it, there have been so many positive benefits that it is getting harder and harder for states to say, no, we shouldn't do this. The newer one, at least newer on a national scale, is the CBD piece. You are seeing, we even have that here now. There's a store downtown in Charleston that I love. I go there all the time. Talk a little bit about how, what that was like, seeing that come up out of the legal cannabis industry, and how people like you have really maximized the use of this for health and wellness reasons.
Yeah, originally when CBD standalone popped up, it didn't really pop. And a lot of that, the reason behind it is the oil at post-extraction was not being refined. So the dosing that was being handed out to people was so small, it just wasn't effective. And again, touching on the Mountain Made high dose product system, science is continuing to show over and over and over again, CBD is only effective in high doses. So when it first got to market, people were like, this is snake oil. CBD doesn't work. What they were really saying, and what they hadn't understood yet, is we don't have a carrier or a delivery system to deliver the dose that will create therapeutic value. Because the extraction methods back then were crude, and all you were doing was pulling raw oil, which is 40 to 50% potent. And, to get 100 milligram dose out of 40 to 50% CBD oil, you're talking about having to consume 5 to 6 shot glasses of that oil, which is disgusting to think about. So the volume of CBD product that you would have had to consume to hit a therapeutic dose outweighed any benefit that you might have wanted. So it didn't pop at first. But as it started to mature, people like myself saw the opportunities in it, and were able to combine past experience in the cannabis space with market experience, and start to create some really nice products that do have a high level of efficacy, and you can find a quality result from CBD therapy nowadays. thanks to the ability, these awesome extractors out in the industry who are able to refine that raw oil and create a more usable product.
Well, I love it. I swear by, sort of to an earlier point of yours, I never tell any of my clients, like, you definitely have to do this. I just say, if this is a thing you're open to, I very much recommend it. I think it works very well. But, to your point earlier, it's not for everyone. And if someone doesn't want to try it, that's cool. There are other things that you can do.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit.
The nice piece about CBD is that it's just low risk, because you're getting the benefits of all the cannabinoids, sometimes even trace amounts of THC, without the risk of becoming too euphoric or too psychotropic, which is the key element of THC. That's what you consume THC for, is psychotropic euphoria, right? I love smoking weed. I like to be high. I function really well when I'm high. Some people don't. So CBD has been able to gain national traction because there's not that fear element to, if I take too much CBD, I'm going to drool on myself or eat a bag of chips or be lazy. So, it's allowed people access to cannabinoids and cannabinoid therapy without the mental fear or risk of ingesting too much THC.
Well, that's awesome. And I think that's a really good marketing piece for why more people should at least give it a shot. What else? So we got to wrap up here in a couple of minutes, but a couple of questions I always like to ask people at the end. Number one, what are, besides, THC or besides CBD and cannabis, what are your personal self-care habits? And second, who is someone or multiple people that you look up to, not necessarily in your industry, but can be as well, that you think we should all we should all check out?
Yeah. So let's start with, my day-to-day is I'm very routine based. I gave myself like a 2-week flexibility with this current crisis just because it is stressful and we're all in a little bit unknown. But starting this week, I'm back waking up to an early alarm. So if we take this current crisis out of the picture, my routine is A+ important to me. I get up between 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning. I work late. I work out, 3 to 5 times a week. I love to do projects at my house, at my home, to keep me busy. I eat 80% healthy with 20% gimmies. I enjoy downtime. I love to watch American Pickers on TV. Like, seeing them collect old junk is always really exciting to me. I read books, again, to keep my brain busy. So it's really, for me, all about staying busy, but healthy busy, because busy can also become a disease in itself. My wife helps me balance that. Staying busy for me, but learning how to balance that busy has been a challenge. So projects that we're rolling out during the crisis, we decided to start. We have a big property and we've wanted to put a garden space in. So we're committing to that. We're going to fence in a 3,500 square foot space with 450 square foot of growing space. We're starting all of our own plants from seed. Again, I do all the maintenance and the remodeling in the home. And it's just something I enjoy. Again, I have enough energy where if I don't displace it, it's going to get displaced into habits that I don't want to get back into.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's actually, you are now the second person who, maybe the third, who has said that having very strong habits is something that's very important to them.
Yeah, I think strong habits, it gives you something to lean into, and again, that's from a broad stroke standpoint. People are like, oh, if I just have habits, I won't wake up with Sunday scaries. No. I still have Sunday scaries. I eat 500 milligrams of CBD a day. I have the luxury of smoking as much weed as I want to all day. And almost every Sunday, I have the Sunday scaries. What I'm able to do through my routines is mitigate the fallout from those Sunday scaries. If I wake up at 6 a.m. on a Sunday and I'm overwhelmed, I have a property. I make my morning coffee. I put on my headphones and I go out and do a chore. I pick up after the dogs, right? I'll leave it at that. I pick up after the dogs. That's a chore I save for Sundays because I have a 2-acre property and I'm able to just walk around and breathe fresh air and be in my podcast. And it helps, right? It's helpful. If I'm still, feeling nervous throughout the day, I'll pull the cars out of the garage and clean the garage, right? That energy is coming from a place of manic or anxiety, but it's what I do with that energy. And because I have healthy patterns of I like to take care of my house, I always have something to do. And that's very important to me. It's not to say that it cured my anxiety. There's no cure for me. I'll always have it. It's what I'm able to do and how I'm able to control that makes a difference in my life now, where before I just ran down to the bar and started slugging. Hell, at that point, it was hard liquor, to diffuse the situation, but all it did was make it worse the next day, right?
That is all very, very well put and very helpful towards what I talk about on this podcast. So thank you. Final question. Who is someone or someones that you look up to that we should all be checking out?
Yeah, John Maxwell, I was introduced. So the job I got out of college, they did a lot of Christian-based leadership camps and opportunities. What's great about John Maxwell is you can be secular or non-secular, and he leads in both those camps because he knows there's a division, secular and non-secular, and a lot of times people won't cross that line. So he's a Christian-based leadership guru who's able to transcend both those lines. So regardless what camp you're in, you're able to pull a ton from him. I binge listen to his podcast. I'll listen to him 3, 4, 5 times over and over again. He's brilliant, and he's just common sense based logic. He has such a great viewpoint of life. He's able to dig deep into himself and say things like we've said on this podcast, where here's how I fail as a person and a leader. Here's how I grew. And, he's just one of the most honest, straightforward, straight shooting people you really could ever expose yourself to. I've read a lot of his books, and I've based a lot of my leadership programs that I put together for my clients in the cannabis space based off John Maxwell, and they work every single time.
That's wonderful. Thank you for telling that. And anyone who's listening wants to check him out, definitely go do so. Let's close with one more time telling us where we can find you.
Yeah, great. So again, my name is Mike. Thank you so much for your time. Please let me know how I can help. We're found at mountainmade.life or mpachan, Pachan, mpachan, Ltd.com. I love to talk about cannabis and hemp. I'm currently onboarding new clients for my business development, business advisory services. Would love to chat with folks that are interested in that. And if anyone would like to check out the CBD, mountainmade.life, we're currently doing a buy one, get one. So buy a build, which is our base product for our program, high dose program, and get either a boost or recover for free, just to try and cater towards people that have been financially hit. And we also know it's just important for people to keep those levels up right now. So we just want to make it as cost effective as possible. And they can find that at mountainmade.life.
All right, welcome back. How awesome. How awesome were Missy and Mike, right? What a great episode. I'm like so thankful. It's amazing that I got both of them on here. It makes me incredibly happy. I hope you enjoyed Missy's shout out and Mike's interview and found that one as interesting as I did. I was just fascinated by everything Mike had to say. So, the good news is, it is time for one of my favorite parts of every episode, and that is the Choose Your Card segment. Some other good news. My shipment from Blurt came in earlier this week, which means I have even more cards to share with you. This one is from a new pack. It's called 54 Reasons Why You Matter, which is just fantastic. It just makes me smile. So, new pack, and the first card from that is going to be, oh, this is fun. Today you are you, that is truer than true. There is no one alive that is youer than you. Obviously, that is from Dr. Seuss. Fun fact, Dr. Seuss actually pronounced his name Dr. Seuss. That is the German pronunciation of his, I want to say it was his grandmother's maiden name. I may be wrong about that fact, but Dr. Seuss. We just say Dr. Seuss. Anyway, he's amazing. This card is fantastic. That is true. No one is more you than you. I actually just had a conversation about that with my coach, who you heard a couple episodes ago, Christian Zavo, about why it's so important for people to get over their own roadblocks, because at the end of the day, nobody knows your story like you do. No one knows your life the way you do. If someone ever tries to tell you something otherwise, like, that's ridiculous. You are in your own skin. Now, is there a perspective from outside your body that people can enlighten you on? Of course there is. But nobody knows what you've gone through or how it's affected you more than you do. So that's a great one. That is a reason why you matter, because you are you. So we've come to the end of the episode, which means that it's time for your good egg. You heard me say earlier in the beginning of the episode that, it's been a tough health week for me. Again, still waiting on some test results and all that kind of jazz. I want to leave you with this. I was sent to a specialist. I'm not going to get into everything. Hopefully by the time this comes out, everything's clear and everything's great and, whatever. But I was sent to a specialist and it didn't go well. She was very dismissive. Not only was she dismissive of my experience, but she was dismissive of my doctor, which was super weird to me. Like, she told me that not only was the pain I was feeling and the symptoms I was going through wrong, like, she actually said that, but she said, and your doctors messed up the 2 tests that confirmed the symptoms I was going through, which was super weird to me. Like, it'd be one thing if she was just like, no, you're overreacting. Like, okay, that's a terrible thing for a doctor to say, at least show some empathy, but for her to also be like, and your doctors suck, like, that's just, you're having a bad day at this point and you're taking it out on your patient. So that was unfortunate. I left there very upset, not because, look, like, I hope she's right. I hope that I'm just feeling weird and everything that I'm feeling is wrong and that my doctors were wrong. Like, that would be amazing. But she didn't say it with a sense of caring. It was like a get out of my office kind of experience. And it was really weird. So I called my doctor and the receptionist had me explain what happened. And when I was done, she was quiet for a minute and she went, oh my God. Like, she was like flabbergasted. And she said, I'm really sorry that you're feeling that way. And I'm really sorry that you had that experience. Something along those lines. And she made me feel better. So your good egg for this episode is pretty simple. Show someone you care, right? That receptionist had more of an impact on me than this specialist who went to years of medical school, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Because the specialist did not care. Just flat out did not care. Like, her own assistant had to tell her, like, I was begging her to at least do another test. And her assistant kind of jumped in and was like, he did say, like was kind of being like, hey doc, why don't you give this guy more than just a minute of your time, And the receptionist could not have been more of the opposite, right? Was just so caring, was so patient, was so validating. She heard me, and it had so much more of an effect on me. So your good egg for this episode is show someone you care. If someone is not feeling great, instead of just dismissing it, tell them, man, it sucks you're going through that. If someone's feeling a feeling right now, which they aren't struggling with, because we all are, just say, yeah, I'm with you. That sucks. And I'm there too. And we're going to get through this together. So show some empathy, show you care, be with people. I love you all, and I will see you next episode. Oh, and remember, choose your struggle.